Ladies and gentlemen, you are now entering the Decent Christian Talk podcast. Enjoy.
Decent Christian Talk episode number 124. Hey everybody, I'm Gabe.
I'm Josiah.
This is a show by the fans for the fans.
Oh, you stole my line. I don't know what to say now.
Well, you could say how much you miss everybody.
I miss you. I miss everybody that's listening in the land of 2021, soon to be 2022. Whenever you're listening, I appreciate it.
And that's why we are here today, because we have made this an annual tradition to count down our top albums of the year. And for those that have not listened to this before, Josiah and I do not know each other's top 10s. This is all going to be a surprise for both of us.
I think so. And I'm definitely going to say that I probably forgot someone, because I always do. And I'm also going to say I am not a music expert. I did not listen to 90,000 billion minutes of music like you did this year.
You're not Josh from Jesus Freak Cat Out.
No. Your Spotify review had 90,000 minutes or something ridiculous like that. It had a lot of zeros.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is my son. A lot of that's just me having stuff in the background at work. But yeah, I listen to it a good bit.
So I'm going to do my best to give you a top 10. If you disagree with it, make your own podcast. But I mean, hopefully I can introduce you to something you haven't listened to yet this year. And maybe you were like, hey, I didn't know that came out. Because at the end of every year, when Gabe asked me for a top 10 list, every year I find an album that I think, oh my gosh, I need to listen to that. And then I do, and then I enjoy it. So here we go. Let's try it.
All right. So if you are new to the show, we usually have a bonus episode where we talk about other things like our most disappointing album of the year. So if we still have any brains left after this, we'll have a bonus episode.
All right, sweet.
All right. So that's found exclusively on patreon.com/Decent Christian Talk for as low as $1 a month. You can access those episodes, and they are a lot of fun. But anyway, without further ado, number 10. So the way this works, before we get into it, I say 10, my number 10 album, Josiah says his number 10 album. We go all the way down to number 2. And then we give some of our honorable mentions before we reveal our top album of the year. Got it?
Got it.
Just reminding Josiah how it works too.
All right.
So number 10 for me, I'm already cheating. This album did not come out in 2021. Well, let me rephrase.
So you cheated before I did.
Well, there's a good reason for this.
Okay.
So technically it was released in 2021. It was recorded in 1988.
Oh, gosh.
This album is by a band called Morelos Forest, 1988, and it's an album called Tales. This album is the very first album that Jason Martin from Starflyer 59 and Ronnie Martin from Joy Electric made, and they made them together at the ages of, I think, 16 and 17. But they finally released this album. It was recorded in 1988. They finally released it. It's interesting. It sounds a lot. I mean, it sounds like those two, both of their influences. It probably sounds more like a Starflyer album than a Joy Electric album, but you can hear some of the electronic new wave stuff that Ronnie likes as well. and it's impressive to hear the guitar work on this record. The vocals are a little bit, they're not the greatest, but I think Ronnie was like 16 at the time. So, there's some grace that you can probably give there. But yes. So if you fire up the webs and you've not heard this album, and I was surprised, I actually looked on Spotify today, and it's not a very popular album. There's a lot of the songs on the album that have not even been streamed 1,000 times. So it's not the most popular album out there, for many reasons, but some of my favorite songs from this record are Sweet Charity and Honeylands and Enchanted. But this was one of those, I talked about this a lot in my in this podcast last year about albums that I listen to when I'm on my bike, and this was one of those albums. So that's my number 10. The rest of my albums were actually recorded this year.
I thought you were going to go with, like, I saw where DC Talk released Free at Last something, like maybe vinyl. I don't remember, but I thought you were going to pull one of those deals. All right, so my number 10 is going to be by Spirit Breaker. It's called Curanata. This is an album that is only number 10 because I have not listened to it very much. I have it on a playlist that I use to run. Unfortunately, I cannot run very far or for very long. So I have not done very much of the listening. And when I do listen, I'm normally near death. So, but it is a good album to move your feet to, that's for sure. But yeah, Spirit Breaker, Curanata. This is one of those albums that looking forward to continue to listen and hopefully can continue to run, to get in shape, because that's what I'm trying to do.
I don't know anything about this album. What kind of, what genre is it?
This is metal. Spirit Breaker is a metal band, and their last album, I have a terrible memory. It has got to be within the last 3 years. I believe it was in my top 5 recent. I don't know. Like I said, terrible memory. But Spirit Breakers, Curanata was something that I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. I think it has something to do with curing, like the cure for something. But so like I said, I have not spent as much time on this as I probably should have, but there, it is number 10.
All right, number 9 for me, just kind of going on with the theme of things, is an album called Vanity by Starflyer 59. So Jason Martin has already been on my list twice already. This album, Starflyer 59, for me, is a band. When you do the Spotify Wrapped every year, for some reason he always ends up in my top 5, and
yeah,
I think it's just one of those. He's always been one of those artists that I can play in the background, and he kind of relaxes me in a way. This album, particularly, there's a song called "Life in Bed" that kind of talks about his struggle with depression, and his just struggle to he feels like he's living his life in bed, and he struggles to get out. And there's actually a long form video about this that's pretty compelling. That this song is it's kind of wrapped around this song, but it's kind of an insider's perspective on someone that just, when you're going through one of those really bad spells of depression, and you just can't seem. I mean, you just can't seem to even get out of bed. There's a heaviness to that, and you can feel that through the song, and you can feel it through some of the songs on this album. And a lot of people are going through that through these weird times of COVID and all that. So it was definitely something I could relate to, and I saw that he's actually going to be playing. When I say he, Jason Martin, he is Starflyer 59 is going to be playing at Audio Feed Festival, and he's not played a show since it's been 10 or 12 years, I think, since he's played a show. So I'm thinking about going. Tickets are only like $50, so we'll see. But yeah, number 9, Starflyer 59, Vanity.
All right. My number 9 is something that you'll probably know more about than me, but I did give it a listen in preparation, at least a few songs. That is Den's Tamed Tongues.
Okay.
Is like an acoustic version of Den's, at least from what I listened to. But it's like, I don't know, it's very good. It's kind of relaxing. It almost has a little bit of a Western feel to it. Of course, Den's were one of the bands that we single-handedly made world famous on this podcast by choosing some of their songs at number 1, and then they went on to win Radio U's top 100 for the best song of the year. But this is one when I was going through the list, I was like, I didn't know Den's put something out. So I listened, and yeah, if you haven't listened to it, you should listen to it. It's a nice little acoustic thing. But
so for those of you that don't know, last year Den's released a record called Taming Tongues.
Yes,
which is the original versions of these songs, and they kind of stripped them down to acoustic. There was a song or two where they just literally set up a microphone around the campfire, and I think they actually recorded a couple of those in West Virginia. They just went camping and just hit record on one of those gadgets that they have, and so yeah, it's I can't say it's my favorite Den's album. I prefer the more rowdy stuff, but I definitely appreciated this album for sure.
Yeah, it seemed very like I do love a good acoustic version of a song, so I think I'm a sucker for that.
All right, so we are to number 8, and I am happy to report that Switchfoot has made it back onto my list.
Okay.
And they are back with their offering this year called Interrobang. And Native Tongue, for those of you that know me, I am a very big Switchfoot fan, but Native Tongue was not my favorite Switchfoot album. It wasn't a bad album. It just wasn't up there with a lot of their other stuff. But I felt like this was more of I felt like they came back to what they do good with this album. Their first single off this album was a song called I Need You to Be Wrong. And it could not be a more perfect song for this time, where it talks about how people just argue just because they want to be right, and they don't listen to the other side. And the chorus of it's I need you to be wrong. And it's kind of a silly idea on its face, but if you really think about it, there's been a lot of division over a lot of things in this country that, some are serious, some are not so serious, but I think this song is a good poke at that, but also causes you to examine the way that a lot of Switchfoot songs have done over the years. And it's not really it's not like one of their more high energy songs that they've been known for over the years. There's, if you want to listen to one of those, Lost Cause and Splinter are both songs that are more high energy that I liked. But yeah, I mean, John Foreman never really ever disappoints. He had an album this year
Called
as
Departures.
well, Departures, and he also released like a live like version of that too. None of which made my list, but they were all kind of honorable mentions for me. But there you go.
Honorable mentions are supposed to be done after number 2.
Well,
Wow.
I won't have to mention that then.
Okay. Well, Switchfoot is one of those bands that I know that they released the song I Need You to Be Wrong, because I have heard that song, but I didn't know they did a full album, and I'm excited because I'm going to go listen to that right after we're done, probably. I also am going to be cheering my fantasy football team on later tonight, which I need, a bunch of points, but that's beside the point. My number 8 is going to be Remedy Drive, Imago Amor. And I probably butchered the way that is said. This is an album that I remember it came out earlier in the year,
right,
in 2021. I listened to it from beginning to end. I remember doing that, and I remember really liking it. And I don't think I've listened since. And that's not because the album is not good. It actually left such an impression on me that I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to put this in my top 10, and I'm going to add it to a playlist so I actually really get to know the album a lot better. And hopefully I get to do that pretty soon. As you can see, some of the ones on the bottom of my list are just ones I don't know enough about, but Remedy Drive is very good, and I'm excited to, like I said, I couldn't really just explain this album very well. I just remember really liking it when I listened to it.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite, this is another honorable mention for me. One of my favorite songs from this album was the opener called Dragons. And Josiah and I have been reading The Lord of the Rings over the last year and a half. And the very first verse, this song kind of puts that story in the background. By the first verse says, "These waters are uncharted, and here there be dragons, and the legacy that was started in the footsteps of Baggins." And the whole song kind of talks about the adversity, and they use the kind of the metaphor of a dragon to fighting your adversity. And so I thought that was a really great way to kick off this album. And if you know Remedy Drive and you know the heart behind their songs, I thought this was a really great way to kick off that album. And it's a really good album for sure. All right, so that takes us to number 7. All right, so this guy has been kind of missing from my lists for a while, but he made it back this year, and it is his album called Neverland 2, and it is by Andy Mineo. And this album, so Andy has not, so like with Neverland 1, that was there's like between Neverland 1 and Neverland 2, there's a lot of albums in between that I wouldn't say that they were bad, but they just didn't resonate with me the way that like Heroes for Sale did or Neverland 1. But this album, I just felt like it was it came more into the Andy that I liked with like the Heroes for Sale. And there's a lot of collaborations on this album. He has one with Lecrae. He does another one with Words Played. For those of you that don't know, those two put a collaboration album out together that was really good. And this song kind of talks about that as well. But Yeah, I there was a lot from this album that resonated with me, and I think I would say that the songs with Lecrae and Words Played were probably my two favorite. Ben About It was super good. Um, I'm not when it comes to hip hop, I'm not the best like inside baseball person talking about it, but I personally enjoyed this album. So there you go.
Yeah, that's very good. My number 7 is my first cheat because it is an EP, and that is Earth Groans the Body. And this is another one that is on my running list, but it's been on my running list longer. I have multiple running lists, I'm not going to lie. But this one gave me some early Norma Jean vibes. It gave me some, maybe a little bit of early Under Oath. I don't know if that's right or not, but definitely some like harder, like a little more chaotic, heavy stuff. And Earth Groans really, really killed this EP. And every time they put something out, they normally put out 2 EPs. I looked and I only saw that there was one, but it's kind of their style. Instead of releasing full-length albums, they release about 5-6 songs at a time every 6 months. So hopefully they'll continue with that, because every time they do, it's really, really good. And I've listened to this one probably 100 times through. It's that good. It's been on repeat multiple times. I listen to it in the car. I listen to it while I run. I don't know the names of any of the songs because I don't look at my phone when I'm driving. I'm sorry.
That's safe.
I don't look at my phone when I'm running because I'm dying. But no, I think, yeah, if you're a fan of that, like I said, it gives, I'm probably, like I said, I'm not an expert, but just old school Norma Jean, like maybe even the Chariot, maybe some of that. So very, very good EP.
You used the word chaotic to describe Earth Groans, and I think there's not a better word to describe them, because you're right. Like I've had this EP on when I was on my bike, and it's like if I'm struggling and this song, like a song from that EP comes on, like I all of a sudden have this shot of adrenaline.
Chaotic good.
Yeah, chaotic in a good way, not like chaotic the Steelers offense.
Oh, why'd you have to do that?
Sorry. All right, so we are at number 6, and this is an album I did not think after the first time or two that I listened to it that it would be anywhere near my top 10. But here we are. It's an album called Scaled and Icy by 21 Pilots.
Oh my goodness. Go ahead.
All right. So this album, when I first listened to it, maybe first time or two, I was like, this can't be right. This is not, this isn't right. It just seemed like, I don't know, it was maybe my expectations with everything. And like, I expected more of a darker album. And what I got was the very opposite of that. At least like on first listen. So what happened was I watched the long form live stream that they did, and I also listened to the Jesus Freak Hideout podcast that they did on this album, and I started to grasp some of the darkness that's on this album. That's kind of very subtle, but definitely there. In kind of like a propaganda type way, like if you watch the live stream, you won't understand. Like it feels like they're putting on like a song and dance, but they have like in a WandaVision type way. Like if you've watched that and you're watching the show that they were putting on, you could tell that there was something going on underneath that was not so happy. And so, yeah, I definitely appreciated this album after I watched that, and I think it's really hard to pick favorites from this. I really liked the live stream version of Shy Away better than the album version. But I also really liked Never Take It, Mulberry Street, and Redecorate. I still do not like Bounce Man at all. I always skip that song. But I understand. I think I understand why it's on there. But Saturday is probably my son's favorite song of the year. So
That album is so good, and I'm mad because I made this list of like 15, 20 out, probably closer to 20 albums, and it is on that list. And then I didn't put it in my top 10. Not on purpose, because it's probably number 2 or 3 for me, to be completely honest. But Never Take It, maybe Song of the Year qualifications, at least nominated. And like you said, when they put it out, it was just like, oh, this is just a summer bop. Like, it's not actually about, like, they normally have albums front to back about something, and this one kind of stepped away from that a little bit, but I really enjoyed that. I listened to it a lot. I remember I was at a friend's cookout one time, and they had music on, and there were neighbors out also having a cookout, and she was like, I don't think what I'm playing is appropriate for what the neighbors should be hearing. Josiah, you take the wheel. So I just put on this album, and they left it on repeat all night, and they're like, this album is incredible. Like, that's so good. And they even like messaged me the next day that I'm still listening to it. So I think, yeah, that album, very good. So I might try to sneak it in at like 2.5 or something like that later on.
All right.
Number 6 for me, Silent Planet, Iridescent. This one came out in November.
Last month, yeah.
Like after Thanksgiving, I'm pretty sure. So I have listened to it. My familiarness with maybe 4 or 5 of the songs is very good. Panopticon, love that song. The song, oh, this is me and my bad memory. It was my song of the year last year.
Right.
Yeah. Why can't I think of the name of it? Whatever. It's on this album. So technically up for song of the year again this year. Trilogy. There is at least one other song that I can't remember the name of that I really liked. And this album is in the style of like Norma Jean a couple years ago when they released an album in November, and it was my most listened to album the following year. Devil Wears Prada did the same thing. This album does have an explicit song in it, which is Silent Planet's first venture into explicit territory, which, you know, I'm not a huge fan of when it comes to music. So I won't say I was disappointed, but that's also something where I haven't really listened to that song, not because I'm not going to listen to it, but I'd like to see if they have any interviews out about it, what they say, why they did it, all these different things. But I want to hear it directly from them and not what some person thinks about it. And I also want to actually read the lyrics to see where it fits in the song. So that might be something that you would look up if you do not like swearing in music. You could probably leave that song off your playlist, but there are 3 or 4 songs on this album that are song of the year contention.
I absolutely love the song Till We Have Faces, and I listened to that song on repeat for when it came out. I absolutely loved that.
Was that
song.
the one with the really catchy chorus? Like it, it's really good.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'll have to listen to it again.
I'm bad with names. You knew this when I was born.
Yes. All right, number 5. We're halfway done already. How about that?
Oh, well, it shorter than this year has seemed to be, I guess. I don't know.
Number 5 is someone near and dear to our hearts. It is the Neon Lights collection by last year's model.
Okay.
Honestly, this album probably would have been a little bit higher had I have not already known a lot of these songs personally that made it on here. And that's not anybody else's fault but my own, because I have actually personally played on a lot of these songs, and so I've known a lot of them for years. So many of them are not new to me, but the songs that are new to me, particularly a song called Home, really, which is one of my favorite songs of the year, really resonated with me. And I'm not just saying that because I know the band. I'm saying that because it really is good. And I think it's a perfect mix of like the new wave stuff that I like, but also it has like a modern take to it that I really like. And so that is number 5. I know that they actually also just released a Kevin Max cover of That Was Then and This Is Now. So if you haven't heard that as well, go check it out. But last year's model, Neon Lights collection number 5. Go check it out.
And that's a real plug, not just because Brennan is a friend and has been on the podcast. I know that is one of Gabe's favorite albums because he has played it to death. And was it that one of your number one songs? I mean, one of your number one albums on
Spotify.
Your Spotify. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, you did give that a lot of listens. My number 5 is explicit tag number 2 of my top 10.
All right.
And this is something I never do, is Empty Made of Fire. This album is it's so catchy and at the same time really depressing.
Yeah.
It's a very, very sad album. I know I have it's a good breakup album. If you're going through it, they talk about it a lot and they give a very honest kind of look at just like heartbreak and kind of the thoughts that creep into your head. And just like the song the song called Close My Eyes is just about like life. And then it's like some terrible, terrible things that they've been going through. And then like just the end of it, they're like, I might let it close my eyes. Like I might just let it beat me. Like I might just give up. I might just let this kill me. And everyone's kind of felt that before in life. Just like when you're down and you're trying to get up and you get kicked and you're down again. So I would say if you're having a really rough time, go listen to this album. If you're not having a rough time, it might take you back and remind you of that rough time. So I don't know if I should put a trigger warning on that, but like at the same time, it's kind of nice to know like they do a very, very good job of putting some of whatever they're going through. I always wonder about that when someone writes an album like this. I'm like, gosh, that guy's feeling some stuff when he wrote this album. And of course, hopefully everything's okay. One of my favorite live concerts I've ever been to was from Empty. And that's thing number 2 that kind of surprised me about this album, because when we saw them live, they actually set off a nuclear warhead, defeated Godzilla, tore down the Empire State Building, rebuilt the Empire State Building, and then jumped off the stage. Like there was the craziest non-pyro concert I've ever been to. There was not one lick of pyro, but they were all over the stage, flipping off of stuff, swinging their guitars around. I almost got my teeth knocked out by a swinging guitar.
I almost
And
broke my nose.
This album is, it has some metal aspects to it, but it's really catchy. It's like got a little bit of pop to it. So I think that kind of surprised me, because I'm like, I'm singing along and like these choruses, these hooks are just really stinking catchy. So Temporary High is one I really liked. Close My Eyes is one I really liked. And then I'm going to stop there because I forget the next song I was going to say. I forget the name of it. But they do have an explicit song in there, and it's just about what they're going through, and they do drop some words in there. So just another heads up on that. They were on a Christian label last year, so I don't know if this is
Still
one of those. Yeah, so I don't know what the popularity of that is, where it's just time to put out Christian albums with swear words on it. I don't know how that works, but here we are. It's been a rough year.
You know, I did like their first album a little bit better than this one. But this was another album that I did like to listen to on my bike, especially that song Temporary High. I really like that song. Yeah, I mean it has been a really rough time, and I mean, you know, whether you're talking about breakups, whether you're talking about, you know, Garrett Russell, going back to the Silent Planet album, his struggles with mental health, you know.
Oh yeah.
When you talk about these things, sometimes you just, what comes out on paper when you're writing about these things, you know, I mean, sometimes it comes out explicitly, but that's what comes out. You can't help yourself. And I know, you know, some people will, you know, some people that don't understand that will kind of scratch their head at it, but you know.
No, I can understand it, because I was once upon a time a psychology major before I did not make it all the way through college. But I understand definitely expressing yourself. It's not my favorite thing. Like I said, it's more just a thing I don't want to put into my own head almost, other than but I can understand, because I've written those prayers before. I've written those things down where they're not family friendly, but I need to get it out, and I didn't write a song about it and publish it. But at the same time, I was not rated G for sure when I put some of that stuff out. But this, definitely go listen to this album. This album probably deserves to be higher than my number 5, to be honest.
All right, that takes me to my number 4, and we are going back. This is a throwback, maybe the biggest throwback of my list. It's an album called Skin and Wind, and it's by Charlie Peacock.
Did he release this before 1988?
No, this actually came out this year.
Okay.
Charlie Peacock, for those of you that don't know, is one of those artists in Christian music that he was very much in his own lane, writing his own music. Maybe not in the same way that maybe like Steve Taylor was, but he was unique, and a lot of up and comers after him noticed, you know, such as DC Talk, and so they, you know, they would go and redo some songs such as In the Light, and Charlie Peacock would go on to produce a lot of really great artists such as Switchfoot, really popular band called the Civil Wars, which is a tragedy what happened, but anyway, this album is talks about kind of just how, you know, when you think about skin and wind, it's kind of talks about kind of like the temporary things and how, the way the wind blows and has power to, move things. And, it's, if you go online and read some of the things that he wrote about this album, I think it's pretty remarkable when you've written so much music but can still be this compelling. And I think it kind of, a lot of his experiences have really gone into his work still. And I think it's a very this album is a production of a life that has been well lived. But yeah, I think the title track on this is really good. The Captain is really good. This was one of those albums that when I'm working, I listen to this album on repeat many, many days this year. And it's my number 4 album.
All right, my number 4 is none other than Phineas.
All right.
The album is called The Fire Itself. And this is another one that I've listened to very, very many times. Of course, one of my favorite songs is the title track, The Fire Itself. There are very many other songs that I also listen to while running. And the closest thing that I can compare this album to, and this is just my thoughts while running, is, do you remember how catchy of a metal that oh man, what's their name? As I Lay Dying. As I Lay Dying put out an album when I was in high school, before the whole debacle of the guy getting arrested and everything.
Right.
But I just remember talking about it with one of my friends, and he's like, heavy metal has no business being this dang catchy. Like some of the guitar riffs and things like that. Phineas did that with some of the songs in this album. And I'm not comparing it to exactly what As I Lay Dying did, but that's kind of the feel I got from this album. It's just like, it's the first time I listened to it, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, wow. And then next thing you know, it's one of those albums that, like, a couple days later, you're like kind of bopping that song in your head a little bit, and then you're listening to it again. And so it's one of those that you can kind of listen to a lot. And I can't really say that like there's one song that like jumps out, like I said for Silent Planet, where I'm like 2 or 3 songs song of the year. Phineas, I feel like with this album, it's just like, if it's on, you're not skipping one. So that's that. I mean, that's how I feel about it. And I like it very, very much. And I put it at number 4 because I think it belongs there, which is, I mean, we're getting up towards like gold medal, silver medal territory here. Mm-hmm. And if there were not maybe some heavy hitters that I put up here, or possibly, I don't know, a little bending of the rules by me, Phineas would have definitely been in the top 3.
All right, that does take us to our top 3, and my number 3 is a album called Blurred Vision by Idle Threat. And Idle Threat, I think their EP last year, Nothing Is Broken for Good, was on my top 10. If not, they were an honorable mention. That was kind of their debut on Tooth and Nail. But that was just like an EP. This was their very first full-length album. And so I was very intrigued on what this would end up And it is, I want to say it is overall much more rowdy than the EP was. But like the songs that I go back to a lot are the more softer ones, particularly the song that was written from the perspective of Peter in the garden when he betrayed Christ. It's a song called Simon. And the whole song kind of talks about the way he fell short. But still he talks about in the aftermath of all that, he's still, how everything ended up was still beautiful. And I don't know, it's I think the first couple songs I heard that song, I couldn't help but cry because it's such a really, really beautiful song. But there's a couple ones that are more rowdy, as I say, like Playing Dead, Driftwood, Cinder. These songs are all so amazing, and you gotta go. This is kind of a newer band. If you've not heard of them, you need to go check this album out. Again, it's called Blurred Vision by Idle Threat. That is my number 3.
So I'm going to be honest here. I have a tie at number 2 and number 3.
Oh boy!
But I wrote number 2 in, and then I wrote number 3 in, and I thought, you know what, I'm switching it. And I thought, no, I can't switch it. I thought, no, I'm switching it. So I'm going to put number 3 in here, but just know that this is tied with number 2.
Okay.
And that 21 Pilots scaled and icy is at 2.5. NF, the mixtape, Cloud. I think it's officially called Clouds, the mixtape. This is another one that NF just kind of dropped, like 21 Pilots dropped their album. And it's not like a concept album like he normally does. He even talks about that a little bit in the music. But this is just kind of like, I got these songs sitting here, and I'm working on an album, I promise. But here's something to listen to while I'm doing that. So some of the songs on here that really jumped out to me were the one he did with Tech Nine, Trust.
Yeah.
That song is very, very good. It's on my running playlist. The song Story is one that I thought I might get tired of, but I get goosebumps almost every single time I listen to it. Just the way he tells the story about a nothing day that ends in absolute I don't know. I don't want to spoil it for anyone that hasn't listened to it, but just mind what you're doing around gas stations. I don't know. But the way he tells story is just incredible. The way that I watched that video before work one morning. I work at 6 a.m. and at like 5:30 in the morning, I'm like jumping up and down on my bed, like just going nuts with how wild that was.
Yeah.
So, but that album was very, very good. I tried my best to not have any recency bias, but I also tried my best not to do anything where I have like the honeymoon period's over, like an album came out early in the year. I've listened to it 100 times. Maybe it dropped down a little bit on my list. So I tried to like have it right where I needed it to be. And I think that's part of the reason why it tied with my number 2 is because that came out more recently. I'm still in the honeymoon phase on that one. NF, the mixtape, might be a little higher eventually, but who knows? Who knows?
Why don't you give your number 2 then, since it's tied?
My number 2 is Neverland 2 by Andy Mineo. And when you listen to it, you said, I think this might be better than Neverland, which is my all-time favorite Andy Mineo thing. And I thought you were just, doing the thing where you both smoke to make sure I actually listen to it. But there's some songs, like you said, there's some songs on there about him trying to figure out life. There's some songs on there. I'm not a dad, but I know that some of those songs probably really struck a chord with you. The one that my favorite song, and I would have to nominate this for Song of the Year. I know I've said that a bunch of times, but this time I mean it. The song Nobody's Coming is absolutely the best song on this album, and maybe the best song of the year, and maybe the best song that everyone, like, if you don't do anything else on this podcast, if you don't go listen to anything I've said, go listen to Nobody's Coming from Neverland 2. It's a song about, like he says in the chorus, if nothing changes before I'm gone, I've got no one else I can blame it on. And it's not a hopeless song where no one's coming to save you, but it's kind of like a wake up. Like, people sit back, and I know you talked about people like to argue. Like, people will throw insults on Facebook, people will do different things, but no one actually does anything. And when you're in trouble, or if you see that your people at work are in trouble, people at your church are in trouble, people in your neighborhood are in trouble, a lot of times what people will do is they'll see that and they'll think, man, that's terrible, somebody should do something. And then they step right over to the other side of the road and leave the guy there. And it's almost like a wake-up call. Are you going to be the good Samaritan? Because nobody's coming. This is this is your job, this is your moment. Why don't you pick up the ball instead of saying, gosh, I hope someone fixes this, or I hope someone does something. And it's a kind of a challenge to do more than talk, do more than insult people, do more than nothing, because no one's going to do it but for you. So I thought that was just kind of really, man, what a good song.
Yeah,
I really like it. I'm going to go listen to it right now.
Don't leave yet, because I still have my number 2 in it. I'm going a completely different way. You might be really surprised by this, but number 2 for me is an album called The Crimson Corridor by Zayo.
What? Okay, tell me about it.
So I've followed Zayo since someone handed me a Purple Door sampler in 2001 or so, and it was the very last song of the entire sampler. And for those of you that don't know, samplers were something were like CDs that people would give you, and it had like 20 songs by 20 different artists. And a lot of times that's how you would discover new artists.
It's the original, like, Spotify playlist or Apple Music Shuffle, or right. Yeah, go ahead.
So the last song on the sampler was a song called 5 Year Winter by Zayo. And they weren't a new band at the time, but they were new to me. And this was like in 2001. And still to this day, that is like the hardest song I've ever heard in my life. And so I've kind of followed them over the years, and some albums I've gravitated a little bit more to. And it helps for those of you that don't know where we are at. We're in like northern West Virginia, and they are more of a local band here. But this album I think it has a lot to do with I spend a lot of time on my bike, and this album. I mean, if you put this on while you're running, you will understand what I mean, because it is an adrenaline pusher. And NPR actually listed "Ships of Thesis," which is like the opening track, as one of the top songs of the year in all of music. And so, and there's a lot of other songs like Croatoan and The Final Ghost and the title track, The Crimson Corridor, that I had on absolute repeat as I was on the bike. And you know, this is not an album for everybody. It is a very much a very rowdy, screaming album. And the very first show that I have gone to in the last 2 years was a Zayo show this summer. And I think that was their first show in 2 years. And it was amazing. And I'm glad I got to see them. They were on their way to Furnace Fest. And that was their first tune-up show on the way there.
Furnace Fest. If you're listening, Furnace Fest. Blind Side. Okay.
Yes. Great point. Number 2, Crimson Corridor, Zayo. So that takes care of our 10 through 2. I guess it's time for our honorable mentions. We've already mentioned a few on the way here. I can mention a few of mine. There is an EP called Rotten Tomatoes by a band called Colony House that I really liked, but it was the EP was so short. I think if it would have been like a song or two longer, it would have made the list. It's very some of the songs are very much what Colony House is used to. This one had like a Beastie Boys type song. I mean, this was kind of all over the place, but it was still really good. Give One, Take One by a band called 68 was one of my favorite albums of the year that didn't quite make the top 10. I mentioned the John Foreman. I think we talked about a couple other ones. There was another album called Upper Hand by a group called Indie Tribe. And for those of you that don't know Indie Tribe, they're kind of like the 116 group from a few years ago, like Lecrae and Tripoli and Andy. But this was No Big Deal and John Keith and Mowgli the Iceberg and a few others. But they put out an album this year together, and it's a really good album. And I'm sure I'll think of a few more while you list a few of yours.
Okay. I thought of something when you were talking, but I've forgotten it. I think my honorable mentions, shout out to Hunter Gwyer, because The Plot in You, the Swan song, is going to be one of my honorable mentions. This is the only band I've mentioned tonight that's not on a Christian label, but I really enjoy them. I saw them at, I believe it was an Under Oath show with Hunter once upon a time, and they really kind of jumped out to me. So I've listened to them ever since. Under Oath put out a bunch of songs this year, which I've really, really liked. Also, no longer a Christian band, so just one of the reasons why they're not in my top 10. Also, that album has not even come out yet. That album is set to come out next year. It is called Voyeurist, if that's how you pronounce it. They have released, I think, 5 or 6 songs. Some of these were albums that I have not listened to, but I found them. And one that really jumped out to me was the Gaither Vocal Band. No, I was just doing that because you looked away to see if you were paying attention. Okay. But hey, good for the Gaither Vocal Band putting out stuff. They put out an album this year. I actually did see that. Need to Breathe put out, I think, 722 albums this year, according to Jesus Freak Hideout. Shout out to Jesus Freak Hideout for compiling this list for me every year. But Death Therapy put out something this year, and I didn't know about it. So that is one I want to listen to. Anne Berlin, I remember they put something out. I think I listened to a song. Haven't really.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that on the bonus episode.
Okay, so I haven't really listened to it yet. So I know John Foreman, Departures. You mentioned the Switchfoot album. I haven't listened to. Newsboys put out Stand. Demon Hunter put out an album called Songs of Death and Resurrection. So those are just some of the ones I would put not only in the honorable mention category, but need to listen category, emphasis on Death Therapy, Melancholy Machines.
Yeah, that's another good one. Small Town Poets released one called Northwest by Southeast that I really dug. And I mean, we mentioned a lot. I think that's probably a nice place to stop before we give our number ones. Are you ready?
Before you give your number one, where could you find that possible bonus episode?
You can find it at patreon.com/Decent Christian Talk. We're going to give some of our picks for favorite songs of the year, our disappointment, our album or music that we're looking forward to in 2022, and who knows what else we'll talk about.
Okay, as you were.
All right. This is an album that came out in January of this year. It's one of the very first albums I listened to all year. I hate to disappoint so many of you, but this album is called Until This Shakes Apart by Five Iron Frenzy.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I cannot believe you put that. We have to put an explicit tag on this podcast.
Yes, that's probably true. You're probably going to have to turn off the rest of this if you are a ska fan. But, Five Iron Frenzy, in a lot of ways, like, we grew up with Steve Taylor. Steve Taylor had kind of a funny side, and he also had a very serious side. And Five Iron Frenzy is pretty much the same way. They have got a very silly side, and then they have a side where they've got some things on their mind. And I remember one of the very first songs not one of the first ones, but after Columbine, I remember them writing a song about that called A New Hope. And their location where they lived was only a couple blocks away from Columbine. And they continue to kind of talk about those types of topics. And I won't go into all the topics because we don't want to have a 3-hour show, but they talk about immigration, they talk about racism, they talk about nationalism. You can go on and on. There's a lot of songs on this album that are actual ska songs where that's if you've listened to Five Iron over the years, it kind of got away from that sound, but some of the songs on here are actual ska, which I dug. But I would say some of my favorite songs on this album are In Through the Outdoor, Renegades, and While Supplies Last. But go check it out. I know ska is not for everybody, but it is my number one album of the year. And they sent me a really nice vinyl too. So.
Oh, so they bribed you?
No, I mean, I purchased it, but
okay, whatever.
It's one of the nicer vinyl packages I've ever gotten. So
I, however, will be accepting bribes if you ever want your album at number one on the list. But you're right, Five Iron Frenzy, I would put them up there with I'll say Showbread has a way with attacking issues, but also kind of being funny. In fact, Reese Roper has been on a couple Showbread songs in the past. I know John Rubin would probably be a good guy, right up there with Steve Taylor. Propaganda, another guy that sometimes you listen to it and you're like, in church when they like start preaching about something and you're like, "Ooh, that's gonna ruffle some feathers." Maybe the pastor should just, move on, tell everyone to love each other, and we'll be back next week. But so some of those guys like to, twist the screws a little bit. And I think Reese Roper is one of those guys that just likes to watch the world burn, but like in a good way, So my number one, you're going to be mad because I'm cheating, because it is an EP, but it is undoubtedly my most favorite, best thing that has come out this year, and that is The Devil Wears Prada Zombie 2. They put out a sequel 10 years from the first zombie EP that they put out. And what is the zombie EP? This is just something that they wanted to do. And they actually got a lot of flack for it the first time they did it. They said, why aren't any of these songs about Jesus? And I said, well, we just kind of wanted to make a movie, with an album. They did it with a space EP. They told some stories. But my favorite song on this album is Contagion. And it's odd listening to it in, the way the world is, because they're talking about a zombie apocalypse, but they're also talking about dealing with just, I don't know, loneliness and sorrow. And Contagion just talks about just how can we keep our heads above when the slow motion is speeding up. That's the hook. And I don't know, they talk about sickness, and it's weird how much just being set in a global pandemic kind of lines up with, of course, nobody's eating anybody that I know of, but just some of the emotions they deal with during the zombie apocalypse in their little zombie EP, they kind of hit, but also every song is just absolute fire. It's so good. Like you said, if you haven't added this to your bicycle playlist yet, you need to, because is hands down the best album or best EP. I like to listen to Zombie 1 and 2 back to back, so I consider that a full album. So that's something you might want to do. Also, my favorite live performance, and I put live in quotations, a lot of bands did their performances like you talked about with 21 Pilots, where they did a concert virtually. My favorite virtual concert of the entire year was the Zombie concert that they did. They did, I believe it was 1 and 2, and then they did 4 or 5 extra songs. And I actually kind of watch that on a regular basis because it's that good. Maybe put it on in the background while I'm working or doing laundry or something to motivate me to get through. But there you go. Number one.
There you have it. Our top 10 list of 2021. If you haven't had enough of this, go on to patreon.com/decent Christian talk. We're going to talk for a little bit more about some of kind of wrapping up 2021. But we will be back in 2022 at some point. I don't know when, but we'll be back. We would love if you guys would continue to listen to our show. We are on Spotify still, Apple Music, YouTube, Amazon Music, all those great things. Give us a nice review if you can. Share it with a friend. Tell us what your favorite albums of the year are. We would love to hear from you. We are on Facebook, and our Facebook group discussion page would be a perfect place for you to tell us those things. We're also on Twitter, DC Talk Act 2, and on Instagram, DC Talk Podcast. Is there anything you want to say to these lovely listeners before we sign off on 2021?
Don't forget to tip your waiters and waitresses. Thanks.
Don't forget to tip your waiters and waitresses. Thanks.